Our story begins with a loyal and civilized border general who, in a single night, raised his army and swore a bold oath. He not only locked the empress in the harem, but also purged every opposing minister. To be honest, the scholars were furious. They cursed him as a traitor, but he simply ordered their books burned, all because he had unexpectedly transmigrated into this world. He arrived just as the original general, leading 800,000 troops, was about to annihilate the Jin kingdom. However, the empress listened to slander and sent 12 consecutive gold medals. At that moment, the original general felt he had to obey the imperial order, which led to his entire family's execution. Our protagonist found this plot so absurd, he actually laughed. He reasoned that with only 800 men, he wouldn't argue, and even with 80,000, he'd hesitate to fight at the palace gates. But since he had 800,000 border troops, he wondered why the empress was the one rebelling against him. Then, he made his move. He ordered the execution of 2 corrupt eunuchs and commanded the entire army to assemble for the general. Had something to say? At his command, the officers saluted in unison, shouting their obedience. In less than the time it takes for incense to burn, a murderous aura filled the camp. He stood tall on the high platform, gazing down at the massive force that stretched like a sea of ants to the horizon. He called out to them, asking them to look back at their past. For 100 years, they had shed blood in the sands amidst the fires of war. And just as they were about to see the Jin kingdom finally fall, the empress listened to lies and sent consecutive imperial decrees, ordering them to abandon their positions. He asked his men if they could truly accept such a thing. As he spoke, his tone became stern and filled with a biting resentment. At first, the soldiers hesitated, but then, several of his most loyal vanguards took the lead, shouting their refusal. Suddenly, the sound of clashing weapons erupted as tens of thousands of soldiers roared in unison, "We do not accept." And then, he roared back, declaring that neither they nor he would ever accept it. The comrades from the last 100 years wouldn't accept it, nor would the countless civilians slaughtered by those beasts. The souls of the fallen wouldn't accept it either. He ordered the entire army to listen. They would execute the eunuchs and ignore the decrees. He declared that once they had wiped out the great Jin kingdom, he had a question for his soldiers. Would they follow him to clear the court and ask those so-called pillars of the state a very simple question? Where exactly did they think they could cast aside the blood-soaked soldiers and the suffering people of the border? In the next instant, we hear the roar of countless soldiers, a sound like thunder shaking the very earth. As the clear the court movement began to take shape, Zhao Qi watched the effect with a sense of grim satisfaction. He immediately mounted his horse and raised his sword high, calling for his men to follow him in a great undertaking. Nearby, the commoners heard the deafening roar, but instead of fear, their faces were filled with smiles. To be honest, they didn't care who sat on the throne. They only knew that as long as the general was there, they were safe. They wouldn't have to fear the Jin barbarians' raids anymore. However, the spies planted in the camp didn't share this joy. Their faces turned pale in an instant. Defying an order to fight the Jin was one thing. The court could handle that later. Whether Zhao Qi lived or died after that didn't really matter to them. But the slogans they heard next changed everything. In that moment, they were utterly stunned. Great General Zhao Qi was openly and shamelessly preparing to rebel. As the secret agents recorded the events, their fingers trembled uncontrollably. "It's over," they muttered. "It's all over." General Zhao was actually rebelling. This was the Zhao army that had terrified the Jin. Who in the dynasty could possibly stop them? They scrambled to send the news back, certain that everyone was about to suffer. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp of the great Jin, the foreign generals were drinking wine and laughing. They had heard about the 12 gold medals and the imperial decrees. They found it hilarious that the damned Zhao Qi had supposedly spat blood in a fit of rage. They told themselves that great Jin was destined to survive, while the fools of the Dafeng dynasty fought amongst themselves. One of them even remarked that if great Jin had such a divine general, they would have given him their absolute trust. One of them asked if they'd accept Zhao Qi's surrender. "Accept it? Not a chance," came the reply. "He slaughtered our people. That dog deserves to be torn to pieces." They bragged over their wine, completely off guard. After all, to be honest, according to the latest intelligence reports, the great threat had already been neutralized, or so they thought. Zhao Qi was supposed to be executed soon on trumped-up charges. However, at that very moment, both inside and outside the camp, everyone felt a series of terrifying tremors. For a heartbeat, the Jin generals' minds went completely blank, and then they began screaming in terror. "Enemy attack! Get the troops in position! Defend!" Could it really be? Could it be Zhao Qi? But by then, it was far too late to react. A flood of iron came rushing in. Their weapons gleamed with a cold, fierce light. "Crush the Jin dogs!" they roared, accompanied by earth-shaking battle cries. The soldiers of the Zhao army surged onto the battlefield with unstoppable force. Many foreign nobles fell in a blind panic. In an instant, the Jin camp turned into a literal purgatory. Severed limbs were scattered everywhere, and bright red blood flowed, like a rising river, painting the vast earth in a piercing crimson. Zhao Qi swung his terrifying halberd, unleashing a series of lethal strikes. With strength and skill greater than ever before, he had become a literal harvesting machine of death. Countless foreign soldiers fell instantly under this fierce offensive. "All of you die," he roared while swinging his weapon and laughing wildly. In that chaos, his black armor was already soaked in the hot blood of his enemies. The sight was enough to make anyone lose their nerve. The foreign soldiers were utterly terrified, one by one. They let out desperate screams, scrambling to escape this living hell. "We surrender. Please, we surrender." Many of them, overcome with terror, simply let their weapons fall into the dust. It was a pathetic sight, really. They fell to their knees, stammering out breathless pleas for mercy, their faces the very picture of absolute fear. Every inch of their skin trembled with despair. But Zhao Qi had no intention of showing mercy whatsoever. What did begging matter? He would kill them anyway. After all, the people of Dafeng had once begged just like this. Deaf. Now they were panicked and afraid, wanting to beg for their lives. But it was far too late. In the next moment, the cold light of the Fengtian halberd swept past, and countless sprays of blood soared into the sky. Meanwhile, we see the foreign generals running from the main tent, witnessing the scene. At first, they felt fear and regret, but then, seeing Zhao Qi's figure, they fell into a frenzy of joy. That was Zhao Qi. If only They could kill the enemy commander, they could win. Heaven had not abandoned their great Gene. That damned bastard actually charged the formation himself. After all, to be honest, throughout history, few commanders lead the charge personally. Because of this, their faces turned red, showing a look of madness as they lunged forward, swearing to seize this chance to turn the tide. Although they knew he was strong, 2 hands are no match for 4. If they surrounded him, they could win. But Zhao Qi simply gave a dark laugh. They were coming at just the right time. What they didn't know was that this wasn't his first life. In his previous incarnations, he had inhabited high-level martial worlds. In those worlds, even dragons had to coil and tigers had to crouch. But in this era of cold steel, these enemies were no different from men seeking death in his eyes. Suddenly, a black shadow darted out. Over a dozen foreign generals were instantly blown apart by him, their bodies flying in all directions. And here, the entire battlefield fell into a deathly silence. How did the young general just chop them up like vegetables? He had killed all the enemy leaders in a single heartbeat. After that, a completely different set of screams echoed across the field. Run, the leaders are all dead. These defunct people are all demons. The defeat was like a mountain collapsing. As Zhao Qi casually sliced through the Jin banner, the foreign soldiers either surrendered or turned to flee in a frenzy. The soldiers of the Zhao army took the opportunity to slaughter in all directions, entering a state of manslaughter. Orders had been given before the battle. No surrenders would be accepted. And so, as the foreigners fled, the Zhao army pursued, never stopping their relentless charge. During this time, there was only death. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. The pursuit continued with feverish excitement. A day later, the main Jin army had completely collapsed. Only a few scattered clans managed to retreat to the grasslands. But the Zhao army didn't stop while they were ahead. And who could blame them, really? An army of 800,000 swept across the entire grassland. When they reached the Jin dynasty tribes, they directly began their assault. They left not even a chicken or dog alive, which, to be honest, was quite thorough. As time passed, the grasslands were drenched in blood. By the third evening, the Great Jin dynasty's capital, Tianling City, was a different world. Picture the scene. While the grasslands are burning, the nobles here are singing and dancing, convinced that the Dingyuan Marquis Zhao Qi was finally going to be killed. Once he was gone, the Great Jin would surely conquer the Central Plains and become the supreme hegemon. However, right at that moment, several bloodstained survivors from the defeated clans appeared, escorted by a few tribal guards. These men had been frightened out of their wits, screaming incoherently that Zhao Qi's army was coming and that everyone needed to run for their lives. In an instant, the festive noise came to a screeching halt. Anger and annoyance flashed across the faces of the nobles. "You bastards," one shouted. "Who allowed these madmen in here? Zhao Qi is already being dealt with by the Empress of Defeng. How could he possibly be attacking us? Execute them for spreading such lies. What a joke. This is Tianling City, the very capital of our Great Jin." The prominent figures from the Central Plains all wore the same mocking sneer, their expressions as cold and sharp as winter ice. High above them sat the Emperor of the Jin dynasty, wearing his wolfskin hat and draped in elaborate gold ornaments. He laughed loudly, his heart filled with an uncontrollable delight. But then, in a sudden flash, the sound of fierce battle cries surged like a tide. The roar shattered the heavens. Iron cavalry smashed through the gates of Tianling City, intent on toppling the Great Jin and wiping out the foreign tribes. Suddenly, those high and mighty nobles were thrown into a panic, their faces turning ashen as they trembled with fear. The scene dissolved into absolute chaos, with screams interweaving into a symphony of terror. "Look, they've actually broken through. The city is being purged." Beneath the city gates, a flash of ruthlessness crossed Zhao Qi's eyes as he prepared to strike once more. He swung his weapon with devastating power. "Follow me into the fray. Leave no one alive." With that command, he charged forward like a tiger descending from the mountains, and stormed into Tianling City. We see his figure flickering across the battlefield, his Fangtian halberd dancing through the air with lethal grace. Every strike was precise and deadly, harvesting the lives of the enemy soldiers one by one. Any foreigner who crossed his path was simply no match for him. The soldiers of the Zhao army were visibly exhausted, yet they remained incredibly excited. After all, the chance to trample Tianling City under their horses' hooves had been the dream of the border clans for generations. A moment later, we see Zhao Qi charging into the heart of the Great Jin court. "Zhao Qi, you deserve to die," someone screams, accusing him of ignoring the peace between the two nations. The foreign emperor's eyes burn with a mixture of fury and disbelief as he roars, asking if Zhao Qi has a death wish for starting this war. The surrounding nobles echo his outrage, their voices rising in a chorus of insults and curses against the man they once thought was under control. They scream that he is a dead man for defying his own empress's decree and launching this unauthorized assault on the Great Jin capital. To be honest, Zhao Qi has no intention of explaining himself to these delusional fools. Instead, he simply spurs his horse forward. He charges like a tiger into a flock of sheep. In an instant, the air is filled with the desperate, disbelieving screams of the foreign elite. They are cut down, their souls departing this world. A moment later, standing atop the city wall in bloodstained black armor, Zhao Qi lets out a roar. His voice echoes through every street, ordering his men to purge the city of all but the Defeng people to ensure the threat is truly uprooted. A day later, the news spreads that the Prince of Qin Junce, has reshaped the very foundations of the world. Below him, the Zhao army shouts with fanatical devotion, hailing their general's might. Meanwhile, in the Defeng capital, Prime Minister Zhao Gui receives a secret message. A look of pure, unadulterated joy crosses his face. He thinks to himself that Zhao Qi is finally finished for defying the imperial will. After ignoring 12 consecutive gold plaques, Zhao Qi's fate is sealed. Not even a resurrected emperor would dare to shield him now. To pardon him would be to trample the royal dignity into the dust. As for the reports of Qin Junce's rebellion, Zhao Gui doesn't take them seriously. As a longtime rival who knows his enemy well, he is certain that Zhao Qi would never actually choose the path of rebellion. He assumes the general is simply prepared to die if it means taking the Great Jin dynasty down with him. Zhao Gui feels a slight pang of regret over the loss of the annual tributes from the Jin, but his mood remains excellent. With Zhao Qi gone, he can finally rule the world as he pleases. He might even reach for a higher seat. At that thought, a flicker of greed dances in the Prime Minister's eyes. He gazes toward the palace like a hungry wolf. Inside those very walls, the Empress reads the latest secret report with a heavy heart. A look of melancholy washes over her. She sighs to herself, thinking that while his loyalty was beyond reproach, he was simply too stubborn. She considers him utterly foolish for his stubbornness. Even if the court saw the intelligence, they would likely dismiss it as a fabrication or a wild exaggeration. The next morning, in the Great Hall, the atmosphere is heavy as the secret reports gathered by spies are finally made public. As the news breaks, the entire hall erupts as if a lightning bolt had struck the floor. The air grows tense as the officials break into a chaotic, frantic uproar. One by one, officials of various ranks step forward to voice their outrage. They claim Zhao Qi's actions are perverse and utterly reckless. They label him a traitor who has defied every order, insisting that his intent to rebel makes him a man who deserves 10,000 deaths. One official begs the Empress to recognize that Zhao Qi's treason is now plain for all to see, demanding the execution of his entire lineage. The censorate officials' words are met with immediate support. At this moment, whether they are civil ministers or military generals, the officials in the hall are surprisingly united in their desire to see Zhao Qi destroyed. The civil officials, heavily influenced by Prime Minister Zhao Gui, have no desire to let a brute like him continue his defiance. Meanwhile, the military nobles, mostly born into privilege, cannot stand the thought of a man who rose from the rank of a common soldier sitting above them in the general's seat. Seeing this wave of hatred, Zhao Gui allows a small, triumphant smirk to cross his face. To him, victory seems almost within reach. High above them, the Empress silently marks several of these men for death. While she is certainly displeased with Zhao Qi's current path, she has never liked seeing her court in such perfect, suspicious agreement. Meanwhile, Zhao Qi's army of 800,000 is returning like a majestic, unstoppable tide toward the capital. 2 days later, just as the court finishes its decrees and a new imperial envoy sets out, Zhao Qi and his massive force have already crossed the plains like a blade aimed straight at the empire's heart. They plunge deep into Dafeng territory, heading for the capital. Along the way, local officials flee in terror at the mere sight of them. Others simply open their gates and surrender. After all, even the most prosperous cities only have a few thousand guards to face 800,000 elites. There is simply no comparison to be made. By the time evening falls on the very day they set out, Zhao Qi's army has already taken 12 cities in rapid succession. Everywhere they go, the people whisper that the great general is returning like a king. We see that the reputation Zhao Qi built over the years allowed him to win the people's hearts with almost no effort at all. Meanwhile, in the capital of the Dafeng dynasty, reports reached the court that Zhao Qi had raised his banner, leading 800,000 troops southward. It was an emergency. He had already taken 3 cities and was charging toward the capital. Zhao Qi has rebelled. Jiayu City has fallen. The cries of messengers echoed through the halls like a never-ending relay race. Exhausted riders from the distant borders arrived one after another, delivering a series of shocking reports that left the court reeling. At this moment, whether it was the cold Empress or the calculating Prime Minister Zhao Gui, every single official present was left utterly speechless, gripped by a sense of dread they had never known. Rebellion? Zhao Qi has actually rebelled. The officials were outraged. How could he dare to raise a flag of revolt? To be honest, they seemed more offended by his audacity than his actions. They called it lawless and absurd, but deep down, they knew the tide had turned. Who could possibly stand against the 800,000 men of the Zhao army? After all, this was the killing star who had slain the Jin Emperor himself. Facing such earth-shattering news, every official stood there stunned, while the Empress fell into a wordless, boiling rage. She felt his betrayal like a physical blow. Execute 9 generations of his lineage. No, it must be 10 generations, she declared. Nearby, Prime Minister Zhao Gui's face turned a ghostly shade of white, his body trembling. It is often said that a bitter enemy understands you best, and he knew the danger better than anyone. He knew Zhao Qi's true strength. If the man had truly decided to rebel, there wasn't an army in the world that could stop him. While the other officials loudly cursed Zhao Qi to please the Empress, many were secretly wondering if it was time to choose a new side. A moment later, the Empress silenced the room with a sharp command. Enough talk. Tell me how we are going to stop this rebel. This Zhao Qi. The ministers immediately erupted into a frantic debate until a general finally stepped forward to speak. He suggested issuing an imperial decree to denounce Zhao Qi while using the 200,000 imperial guards to fortify the capital, holding the city while ordering armies from every corner of the empire to converge. They spoke of utterly destroying the rebel forces, with civil officials righteously suggesting that since the Empress was a true dragon and phoenix, she only needed to stand forth and denounce the traitorous Marquis Yuan for the Zhao army to naturally lay down their arms. Other absurd suggestions followed, like mobilizing noble families or even using the common people as human shields to defend the walls. In truth, most officials felt deep down that they couldn't win a head-on clash against the 800,000 men of the Zhao army. They hoped to exploit sympathy and mercy instead. As she listened to these plans, the Empress suddenly felt the crisis was manageable. With her confidence reignited, she decided to personally lead the campaign to denounce the rebels and quell the uprising herself. The 200,000 imperial guards assembled like a rising tide, strictly guarding every single inch of the capital city's territory. While the capital was fortified, we see Zhao Qi resume his march after a brief rest, leading his forces with unstoppable momentum. He captured 6 major towns in quick succession, his blade pointing directly at the heart of the Dafeng dynasty's power. It seemed as though every obstacle would be ground into dust on his inevitable path toward the very pinnacle of authority. A general named Wu vowed to defeat him once and for all, wanting to show the world what true military genius looked like. To Wu, it was a humiliation that a boy like Zhao Qi had climbed so high. It was surely nothing more than pure luck. Wu volunteered to lead the vanguard to give the rebel a harsh welcome, as these noble-born generals looked down on Zhao Qi's origins. High atop the city walls, we see the Empress in her dragon robes, surrounded by her ministers as they wait for the storm. They gaze toward the vast horizon together, their faces solemn as the thunderous sound of approaching hooves began to shake the earth. Then, the endless ranks of the Zhao army emerged like an overwhelming tide, stretching as far as the eye could see. Their iron armor gleamed with a cold, sharp light under the morning sun, making them appear even more formidable and majestic. A moment later, 150,000 elite elite Imperial Guards formed an indestructible battle array to meet the coming onslaught. Facing them was the 800,000-strong army, surging like a great wave. The heavy air between them was thick with a biting chill. Dozens of noble generals rode forward on their war horses, taking the initiative to shout insults and curses at the traitor Zhao Qi. "Surrender now, you dog. Why don't you crawl out here, you mud-legged peasant? Instead of showing gratitude, you dare to rebel." The insults continued, demanding his death for causing chaos. On the other side, we see Zhao Qi, clad in full black armor, leading a dozen of his trusted subordinates as they gallop through a path that opens silently for them. At this moment, the noble generals feel their excitement boiling over. Their waves of curses and challenges are 3 times louder than before, and the air is thick with a fierce intent to kill. Among them, one particularly aggressive young noble stands out, suddenly driving his mount forward and leaping onto his horse's back. His spear dances like a dragon, shimmering with light as he shouts. He is a subordinate of the Imperial Left General. He screams for the disloyal and unfilial rebel to come and die. Hearing this, the men standing beside Zhao Qi can barely restrain themselves from charging forward to kill him. But Zhao Qi, to be honest, has no patience for this ancient tradition of dueling. In his view, using a duel to boost morale is useless against the Zhao army. And so, without wasting a single breath on words, he decisively waves his hand for a full-scale charge. In an instant, the army surges forward like a tidal wave. The iron cavalry roars out, smashing into the enemy formation in the blink of an eye. Countless Zhao army soldiers follow, shouting as they attack, completely fearless of death. The noble generals are stunned. This isn't how the game is played at all. But since the battle has begun, they have no choice but to fight. The Imperial Guards summon their courage amidst the chaos, waving their weapons to meet the charge. In their minds, they expected the rebels to break and flee at the first sight of them. However, the moment the two tides collide, the guards realize just how wrong they were. To be perfectly honest, it wasn't even close. Compared to the Zhao army, who had trampled the great Jin court, these men were little more than flowers in a greenhouse. They might be taller and more handsome than their opponents, but when the killing starts, they are simply in a different league. That young general, still hoping to show off with his spear, drives his horse forward to meet Zhao Qi head-on. He dreams of taking Zhao Qi's head as a trophy for his promotion. Unfortunately, he has vastly overestimated his own abilities. As their eyes meet, the sky-piercing halberd strikes like a falling star, slicing him in two with terrifying ease before Zhao Qi tosses him aside. After the kill, Zhao Qi doesn't wait for the generals to react. He begins his slaughter, his sky-piercing halberd dancing in a terrifying, wild frenzy. One by one, he cuts down these noble warriors as if they were mere children. In just a few moments, the high-ranking military elites begin to fall. Their clansmen suffer devastating losses alongside them, and we see the morale of the Imperial Guards shatter in an instant. The army scatters like startled birds, their cries filling the air. Their former discipline and glory are completely swallowed by an all-consuming and paralyzing fear. The guards flee in every direction, and some even scramble toward the city gates, desperately hoping for a way out. They wail for the gates to be opened, clearly too terrified to continue the fight. Seeing this, the Great Feng Empress stares in utter horror and disbelief. Lacking any real military experience, she never imagined the battle would end like this, especially with her advantage. A 3-to-1 numerical lead is significant, yet her army collapsed in a heartbeat. Nearby, Prime Minister Zhao Gui and the other officials have turned pale, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. They knew Zhao Qi was a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, but they never expected a display so shocking it defied all imagination. In their hearts, they are likely cursing those arrogant noble generals. If those fools hadn't been so overconfident, insisting on leading 150,000 men out to meet the enemy, this disaster could have been avoided. In the minds of the civil officials, if the 200,000 guards had simply stayed behind the walls, even Zhao Qi couldn't have broken through. But with only 50,000 men currently engaged, the situation has become incredibly dangerous. The officials are also quietly cursing the Empress for her lack of judgment. It seems that in this moment, the weight of her decisions has finally become too heavy to bear. Outside the gates, the soldiers roar in a panic, their screams echoing against the stone. On the wall, Zhao Gui watches with growing fury. He shouts at the top of his lungs, forbidding anyone from opening the gates. He knows that if Zhao Qi enters, the Empress's safety is forfeit. He ordered them to fire arrows, forcing those useless clansmen back to block the enemy. Useless trash. He is livid that they lost in a single exchange and dared to return as deserters. He vows to punish them all once the rebel is dead. He vows that every one of them will be held accountable. In an instant, a rain of arrows is unleashed, and many of the retreating guards are turned into pincushions on the spot. Faced with death from both sides, the survivors are forced to scatter away from the walls. The soldiers continue to scatter in every direction. Interestingly, Zhao Qi's men don't lay a finger on those who surrender. This was, of course, by Zhao Qi's own design. Since they are all of the same kin, he chose to show a measure of mercy. Beyond that, he sees them as potential recruits for his own cause. After all, even 800,000 men aren't quite enough to reshape the world as he envisions it. Meanwhile, as the noble clansmen continue to surrender in droves, Zhao Gui's face turns a sickly shade of green. He is absolutely livid, cursing the bastards who would dare yield to a rebel. In his fury, he vows to execute their entire lineages. Beside him, the Empress looks just as grim, her composure crumbling. We see the tension in her very expression. Half an hour later, the Imperial Guards outside the walls have been utterly routed. They have either vanished into the distance or become prisoners of war. The battlefield is now a grim landscape of carnage, strewn with the remains of the fallen. Zhao Qi slowly rides forward, his sky-piercing halberd held with effortless, arrogant grace. He asks if they are satisfied with this outcome. It's a question that lands like a physical blow to the Empress and her court. Their faces flush with a mix of shame and anger. If they had known it would come to this, they might have reconsidered their path. Perhaps if they hadn't been so eager to strike before he even returned to the capital, they wouldn't be in this position. Looking down at the man they once thought they could control, the officials are filled with a profound sense of regret. They truly never imagined Zhao Qi would be this bold. It was a single, catastrophic miscalculation. After a long, heavy silence, the Empress's regret is swallowed by a cold, helpless rage. She turns to her court, shifting the burden back to them by asking for a strategy to repel the enemy. The silence that follows is deafening. Deep down, the ministers are likely thinking, now you want our help? For a moment, they all seem to share the same desire to simply give up. It's a tempting thought, really. But then reality sets in. If Zhao Qi enters the city, the Empress might survive, but they, the corrupt officials, certainly won't. His slogan, after all, is to eliminate the traitors. For them, holding the city is no longer a choice, it's survival. One of the ministers speaks up, assuring the empress that there is no need for concern. This wall is 30 feet high and as solid as a rock. He points out that the wretched rebels lack heavy siege engines. Furthermore, the moat is deep and wide, nearly 30 feet across. To think they can cross this barrier is nothing but a fool's dream. To be honest, the man sounds quite convinced of his own logic. He claims that even an army of 1,000,000 would be forced to stop at the foot of the wall and sigh in complete helplessness. The plan, such as it is to simply wait for the provincial armies to converge and surround the traitors. Once they arrive, they will supposedly annihilate the rebel forces and restore order to the realm. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? These words are spoken with such conviction that the surrounding ministers can't help but nod in desperate agreement. Soon, a wave of approval rises like a tide, echoing across the entire length of the city wall. It's a rare moment of unity. Hearing this, the Empress of Great Feng slowly manages to calm her inner turmoil, her breathing finally steadying. Her face returns to a mask of calm, though her eyes still flicker with a cold, simmering resentment toward the man below. On the other side, we see Zhao Qi looking at that 30-foot wall and the wide moat without the slightest hint of concern. To an ordinary person, 10 meters of water is an insurmountable chasm, but for our protagonist, it seems it's just another Tuesday. He deftly takes 4 long spears from the soldiers beside him and secures them to his back with practiced ease. Then, with a sudden, sharp command to his horse, he charges directly toward the city gate. The court watches in utter disbelief. The Empress and her ministers stare, wondering if he has finally lost his mind. Is he actually planning to surrender alone? They see it as a golden opportunity. In a sudden panic, the ministers begin screaming for the archers to open fire. The Empress herself doesn't hesitate, shouting that whoever kills Zhao Qi will be rewarded with the highest titles and immense wealth. She offers 100,000 gold pieces for his head. Naturally, this is all the motivation the archers need. Their eyes burn with sudden greed as they lock onto their target, pulling their heavy bows to the breaking point. Suddenly, thousands of arrows fly through the air like a dense, dark cloud. But Zhao Qi doesn't flinch. He simply looks on with disdain. He raises his Fontian halberd with one hand, moving it so quickly it leaves a trail of afterimages. The arrows are either shattered to dust or easily swatted aside. Even a rain of arrows this dense proves utterly useless against a man of his caliber, which is a bit embarrassing for the archers, really. This display leaves thousands of archers staring in stunned silence. Having neutralized the threat, Zhao Qi doesn't waste a single second. While the crowd is still paralyzed by shock, he reaches the edge of the moat. He reaches back for one of the spears he brought along and hurls it with staggering force. The air itself seems to scream with a sonic boom as the spear flies from his hand. Then comes the second, the third, and the fourth. Each one is thrown with the same terrifying precision. 7 spears in total, streak through the air in rapid succession. A heartbeat later, the precarious drawbridge finally gives in to the pull of gravity. Suddenly, a clear path to the city gate opens up before us. Without hesitation, he spurs his horse forward like an arrow shot from a bow. Upon reaching the gate, he swings his halberd with a fury that could level mountains. Amidst a deafening, bone-shaking roar, the massive doors begin to splinter and tear. Only a moment passes before the gate, supposedly as strong as iron, finally collapses in a thunderous heap of rubble. Zhao Qi then bellows the command. The gate is open, and it's time for his men to move. The soldiers of the Zhao family army, who had been waiting for this exact moment, surge forward. Meanwhile, the Empress and her court are left completely speechless. It takes a few moments before the desperate screams of the commanders reach the ears of the defenders. They shout for their men to kill the traitor, promising titles and wealth by royal decree. They are desperate for anyone to step forward. They are told they must hold the gate at all costs. But let's be honest, most of these soldiers have no desire to commit suicide today. A few hot-headed souls manage to find their courage and charge from all sides. Zhao Qi simply gives his weapon a casual, almost bored flick. In an instant, the air is filled with the sound of whistling wind and the grim reality of battle. Seeing this, the rest of the soldiers feel their resolve crumble instantly. They choose life over loyalty, dropping their weapons and falling to their knees in surrender. Some raise their hands high. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Zhao Gui, who once thought he held the world in his hands, along with the other officials, are all absolutely paralyzed with fear. Like a flock of startled birds, they scramble to escape the impending chaos. Originally, they thought they were safe. Even the noble Empress of Great Feng seems to have been forgotten by the panicked crowd in this desperate moment of life and death. She is accidentally knocked to the ground, her once revered robes ruthlessly trampled by those rushing past, a far cry from her usual dignity. While no one spares a thought for her, Zhao Qi has been watching his old acquaintances since before the gate fell. He spurs his horse forward. Within moments, he appears before them, halberd in hand. To the officials, he looks like a terrifying god of war descended to earth. The sight of him leaves the court officials trembling with such primal fear that a few even lose control of their bladders. Standing at the very front is Zhao Gui, still wearing his prestigious Qilin robes. Zhao Qi lets out a mocking scoff. It's a bit late for a misunderstanding now. As he speaks, he tightens his grip on his weapon. The Fontian halberd flashes with a cold light, and in an instant, Zhao Gui's head is severed. The headless body collapses onto the frozen ground. This gruesome sight sends the remaining officials crashing to their knees with a level of synchronization that is truly remarkable. While kneeling, they don't forget to shout at the top of their lungs to defend themselves to the general. They cry out that Zhao Gui was a treacherous villain who deserved to die 10,000 deaths for his crimes. They plead for mercy, claiming they had no connection to the man they were just serving. It is a matter of life and death. Faced with their own mortality, these ministers are acting like Oscar winners. If Zhao Qi didn't know them, he might be fooled. Unfortunately for them, their performance is a waste of time. He raises his bloodstained halberd once again. It is then that the disheveled empress, Lu Ruashi, finds her voice and demands he stop, asking if he truly intends to rebel. Her voice is thick with indignation. Zhao Qi, however, simply stares at the cold, beautiful woman and answers with total honesty. He confirms that yes, he is indeed rebelling. He even offers a mock congratulation to Lu Ruashi for becoming the dynasty's final ruler. At those words, the empress's face turns deathly pale, and she stumbles backward in sheer disbelief. She never imagined he would be so blunt, shocked, or that he wouldn't even bother to hide his intentions. If she had only known that it would end like this, she never would have made those choices. Empress Lu Ruashi's heart is in total turmoil. After a long moment, the suffocating tension finally begins to settle. Lu Ruashi glares at Zhao Qi, claiming her trust was merely a test. She accuses him of open rebellion, daring him to kill her now so the common people can see his true, treacherous face. As she speaks, she closes her eyes. The Empress knows the game is over, and her only remaining hope is to provoke him into giving her a quick death, sparing her from any further humiliation or torture. Unfortunately for her, Zhao Qi finds her weak insults almost cute compared to the internet trolls he faced in his past life. In the blink of an eye, his Fontian halberd moves like a storm, leaving nothing but lethal afterimages in its wake. Screams erupt as dozens of high officials fall by his hand. To be honest, they never stood a chance at resisting. Hearing the cries, Lu Ruashi's body trembles uncontrollably. We must remember, she has only been on the throne for a few years. Barely 20 years old, she is far from the fearless ruler she pretends to be. Suddenly, a large hand wraps firmly around her waist. Feeling this, Lu Ruashi opens her eyes to a sight that leaves her heart racing with fear. The ground is a mess of wreckage, with the sun reflecting off the blood and the torn remnants of official robes. Her mind goes blank for a moment before a surge of fury takes over. She begins to scream at him in a rage. She calls Zhao Qi a bastard, demanding to know if he realizes he just slaughtered the empire's most vital administrators. Even if he intends to start a new dynasty, she asks how he expects to govern the country without them. She warns of total chaos, but Zhao Qi only responds to her hysterical questioning with a playful, mocking smirk. Aside from her lack of common sense, he decides this silly empress isn't actually that bad, though she needs an education. He tells her she overestimates these useless men, claiming that governing a nation doesn't actually require their presence. In fact, he suggests a dog could do their jobs just as well. This dismissive remark only makes Lu Ruashi more furious. She calls him a brute, unable to believe his arrogance. Zhao Qi, however, simply shrugs off her indignation. He gives her slender waist a playful squeeze and tells her to just wait and see what he can do. With an air of absolute authority, the lowly rebel, Zhao Qi grips the gritting teeth of Empress Lu Ruashi. He strides boldly into the magnificent palace, flanked by the formidable soldiers of the Zhao family army who stand like an unbreakable iron wall, ensuring the entire palace is under his absolute control as he takes a seat on the dragon throne. He leans his halberd against the side and, with a mocking half-smile, tells Lu Ruashi that she surely wouldn't want anything to happen to the other members of the great Feng royal family. After a heavy silence, the Empress's expression shifts through a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She is torn between shame and fury, while Zhao Qi watches her with an amused, almost triumphant glint in his eyes. Just as she prepares to step forward, a group of officials is herded into the hall like frightened ducks under the watchful eyes of his soldiers. Zhao Qi tells her to simply stand to the side and play the part of a pretty mascot, a command that, strangely enough, brings her a small sense of relief. As her tension eases slightly, the crowd of officials pours into the hall, but their breath catches the moment they look toward the imperial throne. A wave of shock washes over them. Though they had heard rumors of Zhao Qi's arrival, they never imagined seeing him. At this moment, sitting upon the dragon throne, while their former empress stands beside him as submissive as a servant. This sight makes his true ambitions crystal clear. To be honest, any talk of him merely being the king of Qin was just a ruse to blind the public, and as the realization sinks in, the official's face is pale. One official steps forward, pointing a finger at the man on the throne and shouting, "Zhao Qi, how dare you disregard all sense of status and majesty by sitting there. Step down immediately before you bring further shame upon your family." Several other officials quickly join the chorus, telling him that the throne is not something a man of his station should ever dare to covet. They call him a mere commoner, mocking his audacity to reach for the highest seat in the land. It is simple and easy to see that in the eyes of these noble-born elites, Zhao Qi's humble origins make him nothing more than a speck of dust. Their deep-seated contempt is palpable, as they have spent their entire lives looking down on anyone who wasn't born into a prominent family. Even now, when they are effectively the fish on his chopping block, their arrogance drives them to act with a suicidal level of defiance. Perhaps in the hearts of these elites, people are born into rigid classes, but Zhao Qi knows that the world belongs to everyone. He believes that all should be born equal and that merit should rule the land. With a casual wave of his hand, we see a flash of his ruthless nature. He orders his men to drag these idiots out and execute them on the spot. A brain, he notes, is a useful thing, and he dryly hopes they might actually grow one in their next life. Immediately, the Zhao family soldiers obey without a moment's hesitation. Seeing this, the officials are visibly shaken, and several of them nervously step forward to protest. They argue that Lord Lu only misspoke, and that his crime hardly warrants a death sentence. To be honest, they are quite desperate. They claim the dynasty has always been known for its tolerance, and they ask if Zhao Qi's arbitrary actions truly align with the laws of heaven. It is a bold move, certainly. Zhao Qi listens and nods slowly, his expression suggesting he is giving their words some very serious thought. "You have a point," he says, and for a brief second, the officials relax, their eyes gleaming with a sense of smug, misplaced triumph. But before they can even celebrate their victory, he calmly gives another order. Drag these idiots down and execute them as well. It is a terrifying display of power. He wonders aloud how they could be so blind to the reality of the situation they are in. He asks them, with a bluntness that makes everyone's skin crawl, if he is truly not worthy of being addressed as Your Majesty. The officials are left stunned and speechless. When one finally gasps that he is rebelling, Zhao Qi simply asks if it wasn't already obvious. He dismisses them as useless for taking so long to realize the truth and orders them to be taken away. More fools follow, meeting the exact same fate before they can even finish their sentences. Throughout it all, Zhao Qi remains as calm as if he were simply sitting down for a quiet dinner. In just a few moments, he has sentenced nearly a fifth of the court to death. In the chaos, some officials scream curses, while others face the end with a quiet, dignified resolve. And then, of course, there are those who collapse in total terror, begging for a mercy that Zhao Qi has no intention of granting. He watches them with a cold and detached gaze, looking out over the hall as the guards begin to clear away the consequences of such unfortunate arrogance. "Your Majesty, congratulations," they cry, celebrating the sudden and violent end of the ignorant Great Feng dynasty. They hail his ascension to the throne as the start of a glorious new era, bowing low before their new master. It is destiny, they claim, insisting that only Zhao Qi can lead the common people toward a brand new life. We see a faint, contemptuous smile touch his lips. He finds their sudden change of heart quite sensible. For now, he decides to spare their lives. Nearby, the Empress watches her world crumble, her heart heavy with fury. She never imagined these opportunists would turn so quickly, praising Zhao Qi while dragging her name through the mud. Deep down, she wants to strike them down herself, but the sheer power of the man on the throne keeps her frozen. With a casual wave, Zhao Qi dismisses the court and orders the noble clans to wait outside the hall. Then, his gaze turns toward the Empress, Lu Ruoxi. It seems he is ready for a different kind of confrontation. While the setting isn't quite right for a full celebration, he decides it is time to collect a little interest on his victory. He pulls her toward him. Lu Ruoxi leans against a pillar, trembling as she tries to regain some shred of composure. She glares at him with a mixture of resentment and helplessness, forced to endure this public humiliation. Zhao Qi ignores her glare entirely, sitting upon the dragon throne with a wicked, self-satisfied grin. Seeing that smirk, Lu Ruoxi feels her anger flare up like a wildfire, her face flushing a deep, vivid red. She grinds her teeth in silence, her pride wounded far more than her body. She tells herself that his tyrannical nature will eventually bring about his own ruin. Hearing her muffled protest, he turns. He catches her looking like a cornered tigress, a sharp contrast to her usual cold and distant demeanor. This sudden spark of spirit only amuses him. He stands up, tosses Lu Ruoxi over his shoulder, and begins to walk. He heads toward the private chambers, determined to teach this once noble woman a very personal lesson in hierarchy. She demands to know what he thinks he's doing, especially since it is still broad daylight. Not that it stops him. Even in broad daylight, he makes it clear that as emperor, he can do exactly as he pleases. Meanwhile, across the great Feng dynasty's vast territories, the winds of change begin to howl and dark undercurrents surge among the many border ministers and prominent nobles. They are stunned to hear the news that Zhao Qi has led his army into the capital. To them, the news of his rebellion sounds like a complete fairy tale, utterly impossible, or so they thought. Normally, they would expect a man to die heroically for the crown, but after a brief silence, these lords become quite excited, realizing this chaos serves their own interests perfectly. Whether they plan to grab power or steal the world for themselves, the timing is, to be honest, ideal. With Zhao Qi at the very front bearing all the infamy, these ambitious men begin to issue orders to gather their troops and quell the rebellion. They boast of rising like a great bird on the wind, soaring 90,000 miles. They believe their time has come to enter the capital. They look toward Lu Ruoxi, convinced that since she cannot hold her throne securely, it is now rightfully up for grabs. While some conspirators are anxious, others are delighted, busily spreading rumors of Zhao Qi's rebellion to stir the pot and bury his name under a mountain of blame. But the reports from spies leave many people absolutely stunned. We see their confusion as they learn that 150,000 guards were crushed by a spear stroke breaking a bridge. One man taking a city alone and declaring himself emperor? It sounds like a joke. They call it audacious, insane, even, that a man of such low birth would dare to reach for the heavens. In their eyes, this arrogant upstart must be eliminated immediately. Clearly, to these people, Zhao Qi was never their equal. Compared to those from noble lineages or thousand-year families, a man who originated from the very bottom is seen as a dangerous outsider. Not long after, lords from every corner of the land begin marching their massive armies straight toward the capital. For several days, the generals of the Zhao army and the local gentry plans have remained exactly as they were, showing no signs of change. He knows this isn't something he can simply fix. After all, when an avalanche occurs, no single snowflake is innocent. In the past, these people lived in luxury, enjoying an extravagant lifestyle that ordinary folk couldn't even imagine in a lifetime. Everything they possessed was built upon the blood and tears of the common people. Since they enjoyed the spoils now, it is time for them to pay it all back. If we pity these elites, then who will pity the truly impoverished people at the bottom who struggle just to survive? We see the imperial prison is now overflowing with countless nobles who were once high and mighty, now reduced to prisoners. Inside the palace, Zhao Qi sits boldly on the throne, listening to his general's reports. They inform him that the families of the rebel Zhao Gui and 16 others have been executed. However, some whisper that such excessive slaughter offends the heavens. Hearing this, the former empress, Lu Ruoxi, cannot help but interject. She warns him that such bloodshed truly defies divine will, and that in a few days, he will surely be overthrown. The generals standing below remain silent at her words. Although Lu Ruoxi is a fallen ruler, she has also become Zhao Qi's close companion. Even if she speaks treason, it is not for these men to rebuke her. Everything depends on his mood. But he doesn't get angry. To him, the idea of offending the heavens is simply laughable. He sees these high-sounding words as nothing more than a facade to deceive the masses. He realizes they aren't truly advising him, but are actually terrified that they might face a similar fate one day. They are merely trying to secure a way out. Unfortunately for them, such petty tricks won't work on him. He speaks, and though his presence is imposing, as he sweeps his gaze across the room, he coldly addresses them once again. Since they enjoyed their former power, they must accept the painful price that comes with it. He will not accept any compromises, nor any of their so-called advice. He orders them all to be imprisoned, the guilty to be executed, and the rest to be condemned to hard labor. The former empress bites her lip. She grits her teeth, calling him a bastard and promising he'll regret this. Just then, a messenger rushes into the hall so frantically his helmet nearly falls off. He reports that the former king has raised an army of 200,000 and is marching straight for the capital. Before he can even finish his sentence, several more nobles rush in with dire news. King Zeng has raised 300,000, and King Qin is already approaching the city gates. From the southwest, Watian brings 150,000, while the northern Yu general brings another 200,000. Combined, the numbers are staggering. The total force exceeds 1,000,000 men. Seeing this, Lu Ruoxi lets out a cold laugh. She tells him the whole world has rebelled. What can he possibly do now? She claims the common people have no voice and are merely being used as pawns by the great noble families. To her, his end is inevitable. We see that Zhao Qi, however, isn't worried by these reports. lords. He simply asks, so what? He believes he represents the true heavens. He argues that these nobles don't represent the world belongs to the people. To him, a million-man army is just an opportunity to settle everything in one go. He orders the entire army to prepare for a battle that will decide the fate of the empire. A moment later, his generals look on with a strange intensity. Their expressions are filled with a fanatical loyalty, never once doubting whether his bold words can actually be realized. To be honest, their faith is almost frightening. Meanwhile, the former Empress Lu Ruashi watches with pure contempt. She seems to have given up on trying to reason with a man who refuses to see reality. But in truth, this is exactly the moment Zhao Qi has been waiting for. 10 days pass in a flash, and the rebel armies finally converge outside the capital. These various factions all arrive with their own hidden agendas, and as a result, they begin to naturally keep each other in check. It's a delicate balance of power that prevents any one group from acting too quickly. While waiting for the conflict to erupt, Zhao Qi spends his idle days with Lu Ruashi. Despite her obvious resentment, he continues to assert his dominance over her. On the other side of the city, the officials and noble families who haven't been purged yet are busy hatching their own secret plots. During this tense period, Zhao Qi ignores all traditional customs of appeasing the elite during a regime change. Instead, he continues his ruthless crackdown. He keeps the noble classes under the constant threat of the executioner's blade. By now, these once proud elites are reduced to merely begging for their lives. Those who still hope to overthrow him see this as their last chance to strike back against a ruler they consider a monster. These remaining forces use every secret method at their disposal to establish contact with the rebel armies outside. The web of betrayal is growing quietly. As night falls, it seems there is a silent understanding among the various factions as they almost simultaneously launch their long-plotted schemes. Kill them, seize the gates, remove the pretender, they cry. However, this was merely a ragtag force made of household guards and loyalists thrown together. The moment they approach the city gates, they fall into a sudden ambush, a trap they never saw coming. It is a calculated disaster. We've been played, they scream, realizing too late that their secret plan was known all along. Thousands of arrows suddenly whistle through the air. Before many can even react, they are pinned to the ground by the dense, lethal rain, becoming a truly gruesome sight, living pincushions. It is a chilling scene, where the sudden volley feels like a judgment from the heavens themselves. This ragtag army pays a heavy price for its ambition. As the bodies pile up, elite squads of garrison, soldiers, and noble clansmen emerge from every corner to surround the survivors. High on the wall, we see Zhao Qi watching with a cold, steady gaze. He observes the carnage below without a single flicker of emotion, looking very much like a man who has everything under his absolute control. While these remnants make a desperate final stand, he is simply fishing, using the opportunity to wipe out these unstable elements, so his rule is seen as even more legitimate. He believes all conflict stems from the unequal distribution of resources, and while that can't be permanently erased, he knows that eliminating a specific class can delay the trouble. To be honest, he sees this as a mere sharpening of the blade. The true moment of reckoning hasn't arrived just yet. From a short distance away, a chilling thought echoes. One can always solve a problem by removing the people who create it. Outside the city, the rebel coalition watches this unfold from the shadows. Seeing no room for clever tricks, they realize they must settle this with cold steel. 4 days later, at the break of dawn, the various rebel factions converge outside the gates, forming a massive, dark tide of soldiers that seems to stretch on forever. It is an awe-inspiring, if terrifying, sight. The leaders of these many factions gather like a constellation of power, meeting face to face. Surrounded by their elite guards, they wear carefully practiced, hollow smiles while engaging in intricate negotiations. Every word is a hidden dagger in a silent war of ambition. To them, this first day is merely a stage for trading threats. In the distance, their subordinates begin to shout their demands in a thunderous unison. We hear the rebels acting out, essentially hurling insults at Zhao Qi for his rebellion and claiming they've come to deliver justice. They wrap themselves in a cloak of hypocrisy, hoping to dampen the Zhao army's morale and weaken their resolve before the coming slaughter. It is all preparation for the life and death struggle ahead. Surrounding the heralds are several fierce warriors representing the various rebel factions. Traitor, villain, do you dare to fight? They scream, stepping forward one by one to challenge the defenders to a duel. The goal, of course, is to shake the army's spirit. However, for those who have already witnessed Zhao Qi's inhuman power while following him through the Great Jin dynasty, these taunts have absolutely no effect. To the Zhao soldiers, the idiots shouting outside don't understand the first thing about military morale or the hearts of the people. High upon the city walls, we see Zhao Qi watching the scene with a wild, fierce smile as he reaches out his hand. His crescent halberd gleams coldly in the sunlight. In the next moment, he asks his men if they have the courage to follow their emperor out of the city to face the enemy. As he speaks, the very air seems to vibrate with tension. The response begins as a low rumble, eventually erupting into a roar that ignites the entire capital like a wildfire. Every one of the 500,000 Zhao soldiers is swept up in this passion, their hearts beating in perfect unison. Their weapons flash as they raise a deafening, wild laugh toward the heavens, a sound that makes the million-man army outside turn pale with sudden, visible terror. Whether it is the eloquent advisors or the warriors who were just boasting about their bravery, even the high-ranking rebel leaders feel their confidence begin to crumble in this moment. Their faces twist in shock, shaken to the core by the tidal wave of fury crashing against them from the walls. Deep down, they start to weigh the risks against the rewards, their resolve swaying like a scale out of balance. A sense of gnawing anxiety takes hold, weaving a complex web of doubt among the coalition forces as the atmosphere shifts. Then, the massive city gates swing open with a thunderous boom. A moment later, a figure clad in black armor appears in the morning light, mounted on a powerful warhorse with his crescent halberd shimmering with a lethal chill. Then, leading the charge like the first ray of dawn, Zhao Qi rushes out of the city with unstoppable momentum. The elite generals under his command follow closely behind, each a veteran of 100 battles with unyielding fire in their eyes. Their fighting spirit is a vow to follow him to the death, their armor and weapons gleaming in the sun with a chilling intent. Facing an enemy force that outnumbers them several times over, he doesn't choose to hide behind the safety of the city walls. Instead, he takes the initiative to strike, knowing that on a narrow path, it is the brave who prevail. The rebels watch this and laugh, mocking him loudly. To them, a boor is simply a boor, especially one who falls for such a simple provocation. They find it hilarious that a man who calls himself emperor still charges ahead like a common general. To be honest, they think he's completely brainless for leading the charge himself. They expected a much greater challenge. It seems they overestimated this peasant before they arrived, but for them, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If they can kill him here, the Zhao army will collapse instantly. After all, how could a million-man coalition possibly lose? In their eyes, Zhao Qi is simply walking into his own grave. It seems there is no longer any need for a complex, coordinated attack. They can settle things with this brainless rebel right now. Meanwhile, at the front of the rebel lines, the civil advisors who were busy reciting their prepared insults begin to scramble toward the rear in a panicked rush. They never expected him to ignore the script. The war of words had only just begun, and yet he chose violence immediately. A brute, they mutter, truly a brute. However, the fierce warriors from the various factions feel something quite different. Their faces are twisted with pure ecstasy. Their ultimate target is right in front of them, and if they can take his head, the glory and wealth they've dreamed of will be theirs. Fame and fortune are suddenly within arm's reach. They swarm forward like hornets, howling as they raise their weapons to meet him. One shouts for the false emperor to die, claiming to be General Lu Ziyuan of the Southwest. But a few heartbeats later, as the two forces finally collide, the crescent halberd sweeps through the air with a thunderous crack. The enemy generals are left deafened and dazed as the world blurs. And just like that, there was no after. Over a dozen powerful generals were instantly cut down, leaving only 2 survivors. These lucky stragglers had missed the first wave of the attack, but as they witnessed this inhuman display, their faces turned, deathly pale in an instant. They were terrified out of their wits and tried to flee, but it was far too late for that. As Zhao Qi passed them, he casually cut them down as well. To be honest, the whole thing looked as effortless as taking a sip of water. He didn't even spare those generals a second glance. From the very beginning, his true targets were the leaders and high-ranking officials. A million-man army sounds imposing, but we see that for him, taking a commander's head is as easy as reaching into a bag. After spending centuries hiding like a coward in his previous life, he found this battle to be an incredibly satisfying release. Meanwhile, the faction leaders watching from a distance were absolutely horrified, their eyes bulging at the sight of his power. Among the crowd, the shock was palpable as they realized their overwhelming numbers might not be enough. "Don't let Zhao Qi through," they screamed. 100,000 gold and a title to whoever kills the false emperor. They urged their men forward, shouting that today was the day to win glory and build a legacy. Their words were filled with irresistible temptation and the promise of vast rewards. Hearing this, the generals felt their hearts race. Greed began to burn in their eyes, fueled by pure excitement and desire. It was a powerful motivator, if a dangerous one. A roar echoed through the clouds as the soldiers surged forward like an unstoppable tide, desperate to claim the prize. Zhao Qi, however, showed no fear. He laughed wildly as his crescent halberd swept through the air, leaving only wails in its wake. The battlefield quickly transformed into a living hell. To be perfectly honest, it was a scene of absolute carnage. The ordinary soldiers and generals couldn't slow him down for a second. They were like mantises trying to stop a carriage. Almost effortlessly, he cut down thousands more. Seeing this, the noble leaders lost all their composure as terror took hold. Fear surged through them like a rising tide. Some leaders desperately ordered their men to block his path, their voices trembling. Others didn't even bother with orders. Under the protection of their personal guards, they began to flee toward the horizon. Their retreating figures as they scrambled for safety looked exceptionally pathetic. In the hearts of these men, life was far more precious than any treasure. However, wanting to retreat now was simply too late, especially since they had been his targets from the very start. If they wanted to escape, they would have to ask him first. A moment later, we see him brandishing his flashing weapon amidst the chaos. Like a fierce dragon, he surged forward. Dozens of enemy soldiers threw themselves at him like moths to a flame, which, to be honest, was a suicide mission. With a few casual strikes, he acted as a cold judge, harvesting the souls of those brave but ill-fated warriors without a second thought. At this moment, 2 leaders who hadn't managed to escape yet felt their bodies tremble uncontrollably, letting out terrified shouts. "You cannot kill us. We are of royal blood," they cried, falling to their knees in a desperate plea for mercy. In an instant, a dazzling silver light pierced the sky. Accompanied by 2 dull thuds, 2 bursts of blood sprayed into the air. Afterward, he looked down coldly at those 2 faces frozen in eternal terror. He didn't care about their royal status at all. To him, their titles were a joke. In this camp, he saw them as nothing more than pathetic remnants of a fallen dynasty. As he spoke, he casually cut down the 2 high-ranking commanders right then and there. The surrounding soldiers witnessed this and were struck with absolute horror. Their screams echoed through the clouds, announcing that their leaders were dead. His Highness has fallen. The panic spread through the ranks like a plague, and who could blame them for being terrified? Despair and chaos were written across the faces of the soldiers. Meanwhile, the 800,000 fierce warriors of the Zhao family army were showing their own terrifying power. Like an unstoppable torrent, they completely shattered the enemy's defensive lines. On the other side, Zhao Qi locked onto the fleeing kings. Like a tiger descending a mountain, he charged toward them once again. Everywhere he passed, he left a storm of blood in his wake. Any soldier or general who stood in his way fell in a matter of seconds. The fleeing leaders ran for their lives, but as time passed, those who once marched under the banner of crushing rebels all ended up as fallen souls in the dust of history. Half an hour later, he stood tall in armor, now dyed a deep, visceral red. Under the terrified gazes of the remaining generals, the soldiers of the Zhao family army raised their blood-stained weapons in a roar of triumph. They cheered fervently and without end. High upon the city walls, Empress Daphne had watched the entire process unfold. Her face was a canvas of shock, horror, and a deep, gnawing regret. If she had only known he possessed such terrifying combat power, she wouldn't have been foolish enough to court death. To be honest, she would have treated him like a sacred ancestor. Meanwhile, the soldiers and generals of the Zhao family army began clearing the battlefield. This single strike had shattered a coalition of 1.2 million men. It left 200,000 dead or wounded, 400,000 routed, and 600,000 captured. Our own Zhao family army, originally 800,000 strong, had suffered over 10,000 casualties. Later, whenever the coalition survivors caught even a glimpse of his gaze, they didn't hesitate. They howled in terror and surrendered immediately, throwing their weapons as far as possible. They knelt with hands high, fearing that a single wrong look would get them cut down. He hadn't lost his mind to the point of slaughtering prisoners. prisoners. A true man knows when to act. These soldiers were not to blame. They were merely following orders. In the days that followed, a new storm began to brew within the capital. The remnants who had escaped the first net, along with the noble families who had plundered the people, faced the total purge. Countless treasures of gold and silver were hauled out of their opulent mansions, filling the once empty national treasury to the point that they had to build 8 temporary warehouses just to hold the overflow. Lu Ruashi, who had spent her reign plagued by financial headaches, could only gnash her teeth in bitter hatred. She cursed those noble families, those parasites who had bled the nation dry. She had always intended to dismantle their power through centralized control, but she never imagined they had hidden away such massive mountains of wealth. Had she known, she would have raided their homes long ago, regardless of the blow to her reputation. With such riches, she wouldn't have been so helpless. Of course, that was merely a what-if after witnessing his inhuman performance on the battlefield. Lu Ruashi understood one thing. If he chose to rebel, even 1,000,000 men couldn't stop him. A few days later, the sensational news of the Battle of the Capital swept across the land like a gale. In an instant, many noble families and factions turned pale with fright, their voices trembling as they whispered in horror. From every mansion, similar screams of disbelief could be heard. And on this day, something else occurred. Countless exquisite vessels were smashed to pieces in fits of rage, but whether the nobles believed the news or not, the truth remained unchanged. In an instant, as the majestic ranks of the Zhao family army stood tall outside the city gates, the reality of the situation became undeniable. Their heart-shaking momentum made all doubt and disbelief turn pale and weak. These ironclad facts were impossible to ignore. Like the first light of dawn piercing a shroud of night, the truth was so radiant that even those who closed their eyes and ears could not escape it. And so, we see scenes of people welcoming the royal army blooming across the land. The local power holders, realizing the tide had turned, changed their tune. One by one, they came forward with fawning smiles to offer their submission. In just over 10 days, the political landscape had shifted entirely. However, the remaining court officials and generals were beginning to worry. After 2 rounds of purges, the surviving civil officials of the previous dynasty were scarce. With the new system in place, the top ministerial positions sat empty, and the lower ranks were being filled by whoever was left standing. Having temporary staff in charge was a recipe for disaster. Hearing the pleas of his few remaining ministers, Xiaji began looking for talent to serve Great Qin. He eventually agreed to their requests. To be honest, even the most brilliant leader cannot build a nation without capable hands to do the work. He considered establishing imperial exams to recruit scholars from humble backgrounds, but there was a problem. There weren't enough literate people left. The country still needed to function, but asking illiterate nobles and soldiers, who only knew how to shout His Majesty is invincible, to govern was a tall order. It was, quite frankly, like trying to drive ducks onto a perch. For now, he needed a transitional group to keep the wheels of state turning. After the court sessions, he would return to the harem to vent his frustrations with Lu Ruashi. He realized he might have purged the officials a bit too quickly. On the second day of his reign, he found himself back with Lu Ruashi. His soldiers were brave, certainly, but they lacked the brains for administration. It was a massive headache. By the third day, feeling thoroughly annoyed by the bureaucracy, he sought out the company of our favorite Sundra Empress again. It was an amusing cycle in a way. More than 10 days later, deep within the palace, we find him lying on the dragon bed, utterly drained. The constant demands of governance had left him more exhausted than any battle. Lu Ruashi, stretching lazily beside him, couldn't help but comment. She noted that while conquering the world is easy, ruling it is the real challenge. She had spent her own reign plagued by these same daily headaches. She expressed a hope that he could endure it longer than she did. He simply raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in his eyes as he prepared to show her his stamina. Lu Ruashi watched him, curious to see what this rebel would do next, while the court officials began sending out their messengers. They dispatched subordinates across the Wu dynasty to recruit talent, but they met with a total disaster, a Waterloo of sorts. One old scholar simply told them he was too aged and that the new emperor should look elsewhere before showing them the door. At the estates of the top-tier families, the response was even harsher. They claimed a mere warrior didn't deserve their service and told the messengers to get out. Whether it was the Kong family or any other scholar, no one was willing to serve a state they considered an illegitimate usurper. Similar scenes of rejection played out in countless places, and 10 days later, we return to the great hall where the officials are reporting their failure. Listening to their dejected voices, Xiaji's expression turned as cold as ice. He felt he had given these people far too much face. If they weren't willing to help the country, he decided they would have to bear the consequences. His words were thick with a murderous intent. The officials immediately fell to their knees, pleading with him. They feared such a move would plunge the world into absolute chaos. They argued that killing the scholars would destroy the very foundation of the Wu dynasty. It was, in their eyes, an unthinkable path. But facing their frantic warnings, Xiaji only offered a cold sneer. Since those so-called great families refused to cooperate, he saw no reason to play by their rules anymore. If they didn't want to play the game, he was more than happy to flip the table. If you can't solve the problem, you simply solve the people creating it. And so, carrier pigeons carrying cruel orders began to fly from the capital. They crossed mountains and rivers, heading for every major city. Meanwhile, the noble families were busy celebrating their moral victory at lavish banquets. While drinking heartily, they continued to mock the new regime, calling Xiaji a mere usurper with no real standing. To them, he was just a lucky commoner who had risen by chance, a mud-legged soldier who didn't deserve the service of the elite. They laughed at the very idea of his rule, but their laughter was cut short when a group of Zhao family soldiers burst through the doors. The nobles were shocked, then outraged, shouting that this was the Murong family estate and that these brutes had no right to be there. But before they could finish their threats, a cold voice of judgment echoed from behind the soldiers, sealing the Murong family's fate. Their crimes were deemed unforgivable, and by imperial decree, their house was to be seized. The soldiers moved in, and the cleanup began. The Murong family watched in horror as their kin, the very pillars of their prosperity, fell one by one won in a bloody display. Their blood boiled as they roared in madness, demanding to know what crime the Morone house had possibly committed. From behind them, a voice drifted through the air like a light breeze, delivering the verdict Xiaji had decreed, groundless. In their final moments, the members of the Morone family heard those 3 words and fell to shock like a lightning strike. This was the very label the civil officials of the Great Feng Dynasty had once used to frame Yuan Jinyuan and Xiaji. Now, in a twist of karmic retribution, it was being used against the elite families. Just as they were about to explode in fury and hurl curses at their attackers, a soldier's blade cut them short, proving that when a scholar meets a soldier, logic rarely wins. Under the same sky that very day, the lights of 16 prominent families were abruptly extinguished as they faced total extermination. Their estates were ruthlessly seized, and these earth-shattering events swept through the Wu dynasty like a violent, unstoppable storm. We see the newborn nation plunged into unprecedented turmoil, yet Xiaji knew that for a country to truly be reborn, this was a necessary step, as the common people had suffered for so long that they had forgotten what it even meant to live. By purging these corrupt families, he intended to show the common people exactly how they were supposed to live. He wanted them to know what it meant to be alive, and we return to the palace where a very different scene was unfolding. In the Great Hall, Xiaji was shouting at his men to memorize their lessons, promising 20 rewards for those who succeeded. He warned of random checks where a mistake earned 10 lashes, then pointed his finger at a crude board on the wall. It was covered in pinyin letters, and he taught while threatening his audience of miserable-looking generals. These rough, illiterate men scratched their heads in sheer anxiety, their expressions bordering on a total mental collapse. For them, these past few days had been a literal purgatory. Nearby, the former Empress Lu Ruashi approached to watch him. She looked at this man, whom she found increasingly difficult to read, her mind filled with confusion over his strange methods. She knew that if he released movable type printing, it would spark a golden age, yet he chose a much harder path. He used violent means, disregarding his reputation, to brutally purge the elite families. Hearing her question, he simply chuckled. With a dry laugh, he noted there was no grand reason other than his own will. Once he forced literacy upon the common people, and every citizen could read, he truly wanted to see what those so-called scholars would have left to be so proud of. That reality would certainly be quite amusing. Meanwhile, the various noble clans and powerful families were busy making their own elaborate preparations. It was like a quiet prelude before a storm. On the surface, the Wu dynasty appeared calm and peaceful, like a mirror-like lake. Deep and serene, yes. However, beneath those unknown undercurrents, the winds and clouds were gathering in a surge of hidden tides. Various conspirators and ambitious men were secretly exerting all their strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They were poised to soar the moment the world changed. As time slowly passed, we see the Zhao army's literacy work progressing rapidly. The pinyin system, which had once helped billions of people escape illiteracy, was now showing its true power in this world as well. Combined with the very real threat of execution for failure, it was a remarkably effective teaching tool. To be honest, fear is a great motivator. Essentially, every man forced himself to memorize the pronunciations. There are no natural fools, after all, only those who haven't been properly encouraged. With a bit of pressure, every problem was solved. The simplified characters proved their worth too, being easy to understand and even easier to write. Naturally, the rival noble families were secretly gathering intelligence on this. It said that many fine treasures were smashed in fits of rage that night. To them, education was a sacred privilege, a lofty pursuit reserved only for the upper echelons of society. They believed that all paths were lowly except for scholarship, but that right was strictly reserved for those of noble birth or high status. To the elites, the commoners and peasants were nothing more than mudlegs who didn't deserve the dignity of literacy. If Xiaji actually succeeded, these nobles would lose their ability to look down on everyone else from their high and mighty pedestals. They would no longer be able to use birthright or knowledge to justify their contempt. For the great families, this was utterly intolerable. Driven by desperation, the conspirators who had planned to wait suddenly rushed into action. Near every major city, a strange phenomenon occurred. Groups of bandits and robbers, who had supposedly been wiped out long ago, began to sprout up like weeds in the countryside. We see that as soon as one wave of bandits was wiped out, more sprouted up the next day, specifically targeting commoners whenever the army left the city. When the troops went out to hunt them, the bandits simply vanished, leaving the frustrated soldiers scratching their heads in total confusion. In a fair fight, these soldiers were invincible, but when it came to playing mind games, 800 of them combined, to be honest, were no match for the cunning noble families lurking in each city. 3 days later, word of this chaos reached Xiaji in the palace. His solution was simple and as predictably brutal as ever. If the bandits couldn't be found, he would simply hold the noble families responsible instead. With a massive army at his back, he saw no need for logic. He ordered a total purge. Whether they were involved or not, mere suspicion was more than enough reason for him to act. And so, the order was given. Meanwhile, the nobles were still boasting, convinced they had the upper hand against those they called brutes. They laughed, thinking they had the army running in circles. They assumed the soldiers were losing sleep every night, which they found quite amusing. To them, the world belonged to the elite families. They couldn't fathom mudlegs holding power. The very idea was beneath them, really. They planned to wait until the whole world rebelled. Then, they believed that young emperor would find himself with no place to even be buried. They even raised a toast to their victory, which, naturally, was a bit premature. But just then, the aggressive Zhao soldiers arrived, surrounding the estate entirely. The servants at the gate were terrified and scrambled to report the news. They cried out that it was a disaster. A mob of soldiers had surrounded the house, all of them armed and looking quite dangerous. The nobles rose in a fury, cursing the arrogance of mere soldiers. After all, the great families of the Danyang army possessed limitless resources, and they felt they could easily handle a few troops. They ordered their private guards to be summoned immediately to take the intruders down. But as the words left their mouths, the fierce commanding general led his men forward. Without a moment's hesitation, they smashed through the gates and stormed the mansion, ruthlessly cutting down anyone who dared to stand in their way. It was a display of iron-blooded resolve. Facing the Zhao army, who fought like starving wolves, neither the loyal servants nor the most experienced stewards could do a thing. They were like leaves in an autumn gale, and in the blink of an eye, the old order collapsed. We see the once grand manor, usually filled with laughter, suddenly shrouded in a chilling and murderous atmosphere. A voice, sounding very much like a final judgment, rings out across the estate. The Shi clan of Danyang has reached its end. Their crimes were deemed unforgivable, and the order for their total extermination was given, a grim echo of history repeating itself. The brutal scenes of seizure and execution that once haunted the capital were now playing out in every city across the land. Within a single day, 2/3 of the noble families left over from the old dynasty were simply erased from existence. They never even had the chance to start their rebellion. They were caught completely off guard and nipped in the bud. It seems the time for slow, careful reform had passed. As it turns out, the only truth that mattered was found on the edge of a blade. That day, the empire saw rivers of blood. By the following morning, endless lines of carts were carrying bodies out of the city gates. These mass graves were once reserved for the poor and the forgotten, but now, these former nobles found themselves sharing the same destination. As for the remaining third of the elite families, the news reached them like a thunderclap, and they immediately retreated into the shadows. Most of these family heads were now trembling with fear, deciding it was far better to be a quiet subject than a dead rebel. A few stubborn leaders still harbored resentment and thought of a final stand, but their cries were silenced before they could even begin. The garrison troops showed no mercy, clearing them out entirely. Interestingly, through all of this, the common people remained completely unbothered. To the average citizen, the fall of a noble house was of no consequence. Their only concern was whether they would have enough to eat tomorrow. If anything, watching the corrupt officials and predatory young masters being dragged away in chains was a rather welcome sight. They celebrated in the streets, cheering that these vultures finally got what they deserved. Perhaps, they thought, this new ruler might actually bring peace. We return to the palace, where Xiaji sat upon his throne, listening to the rhythmic reports of the military's progress. In Xioshan City, the Zheng, Wang, and Song families had been dismantled, yielding over 21 million taels of silver, along with 4 million in gold, thousands of priceless antiques, and 500,000 acres of prime farmland. From Danyang and beyond, the reports continued to pour in, detailing hundreds of thousands more acres and mountains of hidden wealth. In Sheng City, the Li family's hidden wealth, 30 million silver taels, was confiscated along with 600,000 acres of land. At this very moment, these staggering numbers were being reported by the flushed and excited soldiers. Not far from the dragon throne, Lu Ruwashi listened until her head began to throb. She stood there in a daze. To be honest, she knew the noble families were wealthy, but she never imagined these local powers were essentially sitting on literal mountains of gold. Combined, this terrifying wealth was dozens of times higher than the entire dynasty's annual tax revenue. We see a faint smile on Xiaji's face. It was a classic case of dynasties changing while the elite remained ironclad. But unfortunately for them, they had the bad luck of crossing his path. Since 2/3 of them were already gone, he decided there was no need for the remaining third to exist either. He ordered a new policy. Starting today, all land would be nationalized, with compensation paid at market value. From now on, every farming household would be allocated land for free based on their size. They would hold the rights to use the land, but never to sell it. 1/10 of the harvest would go to the state, while the rest was theirs, to use or sell as they pleased. He also waived taxes on reclaimed wastelands and opened the granaries for relief. Then, he established a commercial tax enforcement team. For now, a 30% tax on all transaction profits was set. Those who dared to evade it would be fined 100-fold, then 1,000-fold, and finally, they would face execution. He also abolished all master-servant contracts, effectively ending serfdom. All debt contracts were voided as well, with death promised to anyone who tried to enforce them. These decrees flowed from his lips like a steady stream. Every word was layered with deep foresight. Below the throne, the generals could only stare in absolute shock, while the scribes' hands trembled as they hurried to record it all. A moment later, the rough soldiers rushed out to carry out his will, leaving only 2 people in the hall. Lu Ruwashi reclined lazily, her voice tinged with a complex emotion. She asked if this had been his plan all along, to crush the families, seize their riches, and distribute the land to win over the people. It was a path to a new golden age. Xiaji spoke up calmly. He noted that while 2% of the elite controlled 98% of the resources, they simply weren't strong enough. He didn't have the patience for a slow struggle, so he simply swept them away. Now that 98% belonged to him, our story continues with the redistribution of wealth to the common people. Lu Ruwashi let out a soft sigh, noting that this would only solve the problem temporarily. It wouldn't solve it forever. Once the wealth was redistributed, new noble families would simply rise to take their place. She looked at Zhao Qi, wondering if he understood. The noble class, she argued, could never truly be eliminated. And as the emperor, he was effectively the head of the largest noble family of all. Zhao Qi fell silent for a moment. He dared anyone to challenge him, believing the world didn't need so many elites. If he was indeed a noble family, then the people themselves would eventually decide his fate. A flicker of shock crossed Lu Ruwashi's eyes as she wondered what Zhao Qi was truly thinking. Yet, deep down, a complex and unidentifiable emotion began to stir within her. To be honest, she found this man quite difficult to read. His methods were undeniably brutal, but every single action he took was aimed at supporting those at the very bottom of society. He understood the suffering caused by land, taxes, and death, but previously, he had been trapped and restrained by the elites. But now he was different. He was now using the most direct and forceful methods to accomplish everything he once feared to try. As one imperial decree followed another, the scholars who had just begun to master the new writing system became his most effective messengers to address any skepticism within the cities. Within just a few days, even the most remote farmers had heard the news. For those at the bottom, this was undoubtedly the best news they had ever received. All debts to landlords were voided, and the dark days of selling children into slavery were officially overturned. Furthermore, there was free land to farm with a mere 10% tax on the harvest. No other hidden fees or taxes would be required. Meanwhile, picture the scene. Inside the luxurious manors of the elite, the air was filled with the sound of smashing porcelain and furious shouting. A 30% business tax? They called it brutal, comparing his military's forced acquisitions to literal highway robbery. To them, the voiding of their precious contracts was simply impossible. But what could they really do? It was obvious that such a radical shift in wealth would inevitably spark a wave of fierce resistance. The remaining third of the noble families began to lash out in desperation, joined by the wealthy merchants who had once profited so handsomely. They were all starting to stir, but this was entirely expected. In any world, true reform often requires a certain amount of, well, unpleasantness. Zhao Qi felt no fear and certainly no no pity. For the sake of a brighter future, he was perfectly willing to let the blood flow. Over the next few days, any noble family that dared to defy his orders found their doors smashed in by the Zhao army. It was, for the commoners at least, a welcome sight. We see the confiscations begin once more. The soldiers, now quite experienced in these matters, efficiently seized gold and jewels to be claimed by the state. This time, however, the servants and butlers were spared. Once cleared of any crimes, they were granted their freedom and sent back to their hometowns. There, they reunited with their families to wait for their share of free land. Meanwhile, the wealth from the nobles poured into the imperial treasury. As the treasury swelled, the rewards given to the Zhao army seemed like a mere pittance. Soon, massive construction projects began to take shape. Roads, city walls, and houses were built across the land. It was a massive spending spree, funded entirely by the centuries of accumulated noble wealth. During this time, cement was successfully developed. Additionally, new methods for open-pit coal mining and high-temperature furnaces were introduced. Salt production and other innovations began to benefit thousands of households. Zhao Qi didn't know every technical detail himself, of course, but he knew how to provide a vision and a research direction. By offering rewards that no one could refuse, he motivated the masses. Naturally, skilled craftsmen found ways to make his ideas a reality. Under the promise of great rewards, results were inevitable, an eternal truth, really. On the other side of things, the surviving noble families finally realized the truth. To them, Zhao Qi was nothing more than a royal bandit. They saw him as a total tyrant. In their eyes, his military acquisition of their land had actually been a strange sort of mercy. After all, he could have simply taken everything by force. Instead, he offered a small amount of compensation, better than losing both life and wealth. They knew resistance meant certain death. Since they couldn't win, they chose to flee, hoping to rebuild their fortunes in another dynasty. With their wisdom and hidden wealth, they believed they could rise again. At the city gates, a long line of carriages began to depart. One family had clenched his fists, his eyes burning with resentment. He took one last look at the familiar city and made a silent vow. He swore that one day, the tables would turn, and Zhao Qi would pay for the humiliation he had inflicted upon the noble families. Then, he led his kin away in a hurried, undignified retreat. The soldiers guarding the gate watched them go with cold, indifferent expressions. However, half an hour later, a general led 100 cavalrymen out of the city in total silence. Sometime later, miles away, "Damn it, it's the Zhao army," the nobles cried out in despair. "Will you not give us even a single shred of hope?" The general appeared before them with a perfectly calm expression. "Don't talk nonsense," he replied. "Right now, we aren't the Zhao army at all." Instead, they claimed to be mountain bandits who had only just started their trade, lying with straight faces, without even wearing masks. The general told them to stop talking nonsense. They were wasting time. Once they were finished here, they would simply accept amnesty and go legit. We see the soldiers pounce on the remaining nobles like arrows from a bow. Their blades flashed with a clean, terrifying efficiency. Similar scenes played out near many cities. As time passed, every corner of the Wu dynasty began to witness a new transformation every single day. Driven by the lure of steady wages, countless commoners flocked to join the massive construction projects that were now in full swing. They farmed in the morning and worked for the state in the afternoon. At night, they gritted their teeth and struggled to learn pinyin. Mastering these phonetics meant they could keep working for pay. If they failed, they were hit with a literacy tax, collected every month without fail. For these poor folks who would normally split a single copper coin in two, losing money was a fate far worse than death itself. And so, they racked their brains and memorized by rote, forcing themselves to master the new way of reading. Desperation is a powerful teacher, after all. After about half a month, it was proven that under enough pressure, there is absolutely nothing a person cannot learn. This unprecedented method forced enlightenment upon the masses in record time, something the ancient sages likely never even dreamed of. It was an absurd operation, yet someone had actually turned it into a reality. Inside the palace, Zhao Qi looked at the memorials written in pinyin. The sight gave him a bit of a headache, so he tossed them aside. Nearby, a blushing Lu Ruoshi yawned and spoke in a lazy, teasing tone. She remarked that for those men, studying was likely the most painful task of all. Zhao Qi glanced at her as they sat together. Having spent so much time with her, the former empress's true nature was emerging, cold and dignified outwardly, but secretly quite stubborn and proud. Beyond the borders, the remnants of the great Jin dynasty were drinking blood wine and swearing eternal oaths to their gods. They declared to the eternal heaven that whoever could invade the central plains and trample the Wu capital would be the one to lead. That man would inherit the throne and rule the entire grassland. While the generals grew restless, someone dared to mention Zhao Qi's terrifying strength. The leaders simply scoffed at the idea. To them, the claim that a man could break a city gate with one hand was utterly ridiculous. Those who have never encountered a true monster can never imagine just how absurdly powerful one can be. A few days later, a messenger arrived. Intelligence arrived. The remnants of the Great Jin had united the tribes into a coalition of 500,000, breaking through Yen Pass and bypassing cities to march for the capital. Our generals were furious, clamoring for the chance to fight these damned barbarians and leave not a single one of them standing. Upon his throne, however, Zhao Qi allowed a small smile to escape. It was as if someone had handed him a pillow just as he was nodding off. Perfect timing, really. You see, he had recently wiped out nearly 200,000 members of the old noble families and abolished slavery, turning those people back into commoners. This left him short on labor, so capturing a wave of foreigners to work like oxen was actually quite convenient. He decided to lead the campaign personally. The very next day, he led 200,000 of his Zhao family troops out of the safety of the capital to meet the enemy head-on. 2 days later, they encountered the enemy vanguard of 300,000 men, and Zhao Qi, not wanting to waste time, decided on a simpler approach. He grabbed his Fangtian halberd and charged in like a whirlwind. His soldiers, who were quite used to this by now, followed him with a roar. They screamed to kill the Jin dogs as they watched their emperor lead the charge, while the foreign leaders watched his approach with a mix of arrogance. To be honest, their reaction to seeing a single man charging their entire army was exactly what you would expect. But within a dozen breaths, before they could even finish a sentence, he had carved a bloody path straight to the front of the tribal leaders. They barely had time to consider begging for mercy before their world began to spin, their consciousness fading as their heads left left their shoulders. Just like that, the leaders of the Jin remnants fell beneath his halberd, and then Zhao Qi poured his full strength into a single, massive swing. It was as if everything within 500 meters was suddenly purified by a mysterious force, leaving the path ahead completely transformed. The foreign soldiers didn't even have time to scream before they were turned into a fine red mist, followed by a dozen flashes of blinding white light. The battlefield was suddenly scarred with paths of blood and massive, deep craters, and in that moment, a heavy silence fell over the entire valley. The eternal heaven, the survivors cried out, convinced they were looking at a god. It is the incarnation of the eternal heaven. We must submit. Without another word, the foreigners dropped their weapons and began to kowtow in terror, while the Zhao army's cheers for their ghost tiger shook the earth. By the time the dust settled, 100,000 lay dead, and 370,000 had been taken prisoner. Upon returning to the capital, Zhao Qi calmly ordered the captives to be distributed among the cities to serve as convict labor for his construction projects. They would be put to work building roads, mining, and farming. After 10 years of service, they would earn their freedom and a city residency. Our general's eyes practically sparkled at the prospect, while the news spread through the dynasties and set the common folk into a frenzy of excitement. Meanwhile, within the manners of the surviving noble families, the only sounds to be heard were the bitter echoes of endless, rhythmic cursing. It was a chorus of resentment that, to be perfectly honest, did absolutely nothing to change their fading fortunes. A massive coalition was forming, 600,000 from the dynasties, over 1 million from the southern tribes, and another 500,000 from the northern plateau. Altogether, nearly 3 million soldiers were gathering like a great, suffocating net, marching toward them with an air of absolute, aggressive confidence. Back in the grand hall, as messenger after messenger brought news of these movements to the palace, the air was suddenly filled with mocking laughter. To our soldiers, these barbarians were little more than a joke. One general even stepped forward, begging the emperor for 100,000 men to crush them. Another scoffed, claiming he only needed 30,000, and soon the generals were bickering back and forth in a display of competitive bravado. They didn't seem the least bit concerned about a 3 million man army, and watching them, a faint, amused smile finally played across Zhao Qi's lips. He cleared his throat, and the room fell into an instant, heavy silence as his majestic voice rang out like a crack of thunder. If those tribes were so eager to find their own ends, he decided, then he would simply have to grant them that wish. He ordered 1.2 million men to march out in all directions, with instructions to prioritize slaughter until every one of those enemy nations was erased. Furthermore, he opened recruitment for the commoners to handle logistics, promising them 100 acres of land beyond the borders for their service. And for the generals, the ultimate prize was dangled. Those who achieved the greatest merit in this war could even be crowned as kings. In an instant, the generals were breathing heavily with excitement, and as the imperial notices were posted, the common people flocked to the recruitment points. We see these stations overflowing with crowds of muscular men as the Wu dynasty began to operate with a terrifying, clockwork efficiency. Before the enemy could even set foot across the border, our armies were already on the move, eagerly rushing toward their respective battlefields. 2 days later, the Eastern Front saw the first clash, where the great Liang general watched with pure contempt as his 800,000 men faced a mere 300,000. In his mind, this was nothing more than a slaughter. After all, no matter how many sheep there are, they can never hope to defeat a pack of tigers. The Wu dynasty generals were practically vibrating with excitement, shouting to their men that the time to carve out their legacy was finally here. We see the moment the two armies collided with a deafening roar. The great Liang soldiers were instantly dazed as the Wu warriors fought like gods. With a casual wave of their hands, they sent armored cavalry flying like straw dolls, while the generals swung their weapons to pierce through enemy lines. Their formations cut through the opposition like a hot blade. The enemy wondered how these Wu soldiers could be so strong. They didn't even seem human. In just a few moments, the army of 800,000 was shattered head-on, their morale collapsing as soldiers fled in every direction, crying for mercy. Seeing the enemy was such easy prey, the 2 million commoners handling logistics joined the fray, howling as they rushed in to finish them off. How can an old man be stronger than me? The invaders wondered. They simply couldn't comprehend how these Central Plains people had become so powerful. Within a single hour, the army of 800,000 was completely surrounded, with not a single man escaping. The same scene played out in the south, west, and north. Formations and strategies meant absolutely nothing against such overwhelming power. The enemy generals were beaten senseless by soldiers they had never even heard of. They were beaten so badly they began to question their very existence. In just 1 month, the surrounding enemy kingdoms were completely wiped out. The Wu dynasty's territory grew tenfold, and the captured emperors and nobles were escorted back to the capital in chains like common criminals. Zhao Qi didn't even bother drawing his sword, simply ordering them to be thrown into the imperial prison. Meanwhile, his relationship with Lu Ruoxi was shifting. During those long years of conquest and governance, something between the two of them was quietly and steadily beginning to change. It was a subtle transformation, one that neither of them could have predicted when this journey first began. And yet, it was becoming more undeniable with every passing day as they stood together at the height of their power. He adjusted his expression and asked her with a slight, amused smile if she was actually trying to pay him a compliment. She admitted that it certainly counted as one, though she spoke with a playful, guarded tone to keep him from getting too airy. To be honest, she had always been a bit stubborn when it came to praising him, even when he deserved it most. She turned her face away, telling him not to get any grand ideas. He simply walked to her side, and they watched the moon in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke, revealing that he actually came from a very distant place, a world with a history even more brutal than the one they knew. Our story continues as Zhao Qi explains that history once held civilizations far more glorious than this, where people were oppressed for millennia until one man stood up to smash the shackles of the old world. He told the people that all are born equal, and that a single spark could eventually start a prairie fire. We hear how he taught them that no ruler lives forever, only the people are eternal. It was this man, this great comrade, who ensured that everyone could eat their fill and receive an education, and Zhao Qi was determined not to let those tragedies repeat here. Lu Ruoxi watched him, her eyes filled with an unprecedented seriousness as she asked what his world was really like. He admitted it was complex, filled with both good people and bad, light and darkness. But one thing remained the same. The common people never asked for much, only to be fed, clothed, and to live their lives in peace. He nodded silently, and after that night, the way she looked at him began to change, showing less resentment and more of a tenderness she likely didn't even notice herself. A little later, we find Zhao Qi practicing in the garden with his halberd, the weapon whistling through the air with terrifying power. Lu Ruashi had been standing under the porch for some time, watching him. Quietly, "Teach me," she suddenly said, asking him to train her in the ways of combat. She lifted her chin with all the poise of an empress, even as she uttered words that didn't sound like a ruler at all, admitting she didn't want to always be the one standing behind him. He studied her for a moment and laughed, agreeing, though he warned her that he wouldn't be easy on her. She scoffed, asking if he thought the Empress of Great Foam was afraid of a commoner like him. From that day on, two figures could be seen in the garden every morning, one dominant and agile, the other stubborn and unyielding. To be honest, Lu Ruashi's talent was quite impressive. Though her foundation was weak, her spirit was incredibly resilient. As she pulled herself up after every fall, biting her tongue through the pain and never once calling for a halt. Through those endless hours of sparring and close-quarters drills, the distance between the two of them seemed to shrink in ways they hadn't quite anticipated. Once, after he swept her to the ground with a single move, she lay there gasping for air and asked if they would have simply been ruler and subject had he never rebelled. "No," he replied, reaching down to pull her up. He pointed out that with the way her ministers behaved, they would have eventually been the end of her anyway. She conceded the point, whispering something so softly that he couldn't quite catch it. When he asked what she said, she simply told him to continue. Blushing slightly, she raised her wooden sword once more. A year passed in a flash, and we see the Wu dynasty developing at a truly unprecedented speed. We see robust citizens walking confidently along paved cement roads, while the cries of vendors in the commercial districts rise and fall in a steady rhythm. In the countryside, farmers use new tools to till the land, and hunters chase tigers across the mountains with newfound vigor. The expeditionary forces, like wild horses, have fought their way to the ends of the earth, sending a constant stream of spoils back to the Wu dynasty. Countless tribute goods are transported inland to build the nation's infrastructure, while imperial decrees encourage billions of citizens to reclaim new territories. These edicts reach every town, promising more free land the further one travels from the capital. Naturally, the people are eager to sign up. Meanwhile, the remnants of the old noble families realize with despair that they have been completely left behind by the times. On the city walls, they find themselves unable to read a single word of the simplified character announcements. Compared to the commoners, these once proud scholars now look like total illiterates. Public toilets, public carriages, and cement are all concepts they've never heard of. As their familiar world vanishes, strange new things take its place. Although they still live here, they feel an unspeakable sense of alienation from this newborn Wu dynasty. A deep, lingering fear takes root in their hearts as they realize the noble class has truly perished. When a historical flood comes rushing in, any attempt to stop it is as futile as a mantis trying to block a chariot. Years pass like flowing water, and one night, amidst the heavy downpour, Zhao Qi stands alone before his study, lost in thought. Inside, the old plaque has long been replaced by 4 new characters, the world for all. Yet, deep down, he feels the power within his bones has reached its absolute limit. His strength stirs restlessly, but for the past 6 months, no matter how hard he trains, he hasn't been able to advance even a single step. In this low-level world, it feels as though an invisible barrier is blocking his path. This world is simply too small for him. Lost in thought again, Lu Ruashi approaches, holding a paper umbrella as she stands by his side. After 10 years together, she no longer harbors the old enmity and resentment. Though she still occasionally calls him a rebel, her voice now carries far more affection than hate. "Ruashi," he says, calling her name softly. "Do you believe there is a much wider world beyond this one?" She frowns slightly, telling him he's talking nonsense again. But he insists it isn't nonsense. He can feel that the edge of this world isn't the true end of existence. Somewhere far away, there is power beyond their wildest imagination. A place where a master's single punch could shatter the heavens. A place where a single arrow can split the sky. They call it a higher world. We see Lu Ruashi's hand, the one holding the umbrella, tremble ever so slightly. After 10 years of living side by side, she knows this man far too well. He never speaks in vain, and certainly never makes a claim he can't back up. She asks if he wants to go, but for him, it isn't a choice. His power has reached the absolute limit of this world. He can no longer advance here. To grow stronger, he must step into a higher realm. And then, turning to look at her, a faint smile plays on his lips as he suggests it might be more fun over there. Lu Ruashi remains silent for a long, long time, until suddenly, she closes her umbrella, letting the downpour soak her. Her eyes are rimmed with red, yet she fights to keep her voice steady. She asks what will become of the Wu dynasty. He explains that the Senate is ready to govern, and he has already established the inspectorate and the judiciary. The system of checks and balances is set, and with a literate population, talented individuals from all walks of life can now serve the state. With a strong army and a full treasury, he remarks that even a dog on the throne could maintain peace for decades. She calls him irresponsible, but he simply points out that he conquered the world and broke the old nobility. He redistributed the land and ensured the people were fed. To be honest, he feels he's been more than responsible enough as he scratches his head. She finds herself at a loss for words. He reaches out to shield her from the rain, telling her not to glare. Then, he asks the only question that matters. Will she come with him? The thought makes her tremble, her eyes widening in surprise. He warns her that the higher world is perilous and filled with masters, but it offers sights this world could never provide. There, she could become so powerful that she would never have to depend on anyone ever again. He looks at her with a rare, piercing sincerity, asking if she prefers this peaceful life or the unknown. The two of them stand there, locked in a silent gaze amidst the rain. Finally, Lu Ruashi takes a breath and lifts her rain-streaked chin. Her voice drops, so low it is nearly lost to the storm. She asks who could possibly trust him to go alone without causing some sort of catastrophe. He lets out a booming laugh that cuts through the rain, echoing across the silent palace grounds. A few days later, the Wu dynasty prepares for the most magnificent celebration in its history, with every street draped in silk and lanterns. As the first light of dawn pierces the mist, it illuminates the magnificent altar where incense smoke swirls. Gu Qingming slowly enters the sacrificial grounds, followed closely by Lu Ruashi, while the officials and soldiers maintain a solemn pace. Countless Citizens have gathered from every corner, their clothes neat and their faces filled with a wild, religious fervor. Long live the emperor. We can see him. At last, we see the living emperor. To be honest, the crowd's excitement is almost overwhelming. High-pitched chanting begins as the rituals of wine, martial displays, and sacred texts unfold one by one. Then, he steps forward, finally releasing the terrifying power he had kept hidden for so long. Instantly, the sky transforms. The clouds tremble as an endless, majestic pressure sweeps across the land for 100 miles. The palace ladies turn pale, and the officials and soldiers are struck with pure terror. Nobles and commoners alike find themselves kneeling involuntarily. It is a staggering sight. They wonder if this is the true power of the 5 emperors, a celestial force no mortal could ever hope to match. He declares that his achievements have surpassed the sovereigns of old, having rebuilt the nation's glory. Today, his merit is finally complete. He announces the throne will remain vacant while the councils govern. Furthermore, he tells them he will be watching from above. Before his words even fade, the sky shifts violently. Dark clouds surge out of nowhere, thick and heavy. They shroud the heavens until a crack splits the center of the darkness, and 3 stars suddenly ignite with brilliant light. The stars of 7 Killings, Army Breaker, and Greedy Wolf shine with a soul-piercing radiance. 3 beams of starlight descend from the vast galaxy, crossing the void of the universe to merge into a single pillar of light that pours into him. At that same moment, a void-cracked tears open in the air, and from the other side comes a suffocating, terrifying aura. It is a world far beyond this realm, where the power is so dense it feels almost physical. Even a fleeting glimpse is enough to make the soul tremble. Everyone watches, stunned, some weeping with joy, others prostrating themselves in the dirt. They believe their emperor is returning to the heavens. He turns to take one last look at the empire he built with his own hands, at the kneeling soldiers, and at the world he has completely renewed. He looks past the capital at the vibrant landscape. 10 years have passed since he arrived as a soul from another world. He rose from a wandering stranger to an emperor who unified the world, bringing education and literacy to the masses. He crushed the noble houses and conquered foreign tribes. To be honest, he did many things his predecessors never even dreamed of. Was it worth it? Looking at the smiles of the people, the answer is obvious. He reaches out and takes the hand of Lu Ruashi. Her hand is trembling, but her gaze is steady. "Let's go," she says softly, her eyes bright with determination. A moment later, the two of them soar into the air, entering the void crack amidst a shower of starlight. The glow begins to fade. The rift closes, and the sky returns to normal, leaving only the lingering shadows of 3 stars hanging above the altar. They seem to watch over the land for eternity. Below, the people look up with tears in their eyes. Their tiger emperor has finally ascended. Shouts of "Long live the emperor" shake the very foundations of the earth and refuse to quiet down. But from the void, a final echo of his voice returns. He tells them to remember, it is the people who should live forever. Inside the void passage, surrounded by swirling starlight and chaos, Lu Ruashi is still tightly clutching his hand. Her fingers are cold. He asks if she is afraid, and though she denies it, her grip tells a different story. He smiles and looks toward the brightening light at the end of the tunnel. Within that glow, we see the outlines of endless mountain ranges and waterfalls that look like inverted galaxies. Further away, a truly terrifying aura clashes between heaven and earth. This level of power is far beyond the peak strength he achieved during his time in the 5 dynasties. It is a force that exists on an entirely different level. He can feel his internal bottleneck finally beginning to loosen. Once he enters that world, his next breakthrough will be inevitable. Lu Ruashi senses that same overwhelming pressure, and a flicker of apprehension crosses her beautiful eyes. She asks if there are really people there stronger than him. He narrows his eyes, a hint of excitement touching his lips. They are stronger than she can imagine. In that place, his current power might not even qualify as entry level. Lu Ruashi takes a sharp breath. Suddenly, Lu Ruashi lets go of his hand and straightens her back, regaining the proud, regal bearing of an empress. She has ruled kingdoms before, so why should she fear a new world? She tilts her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she tells him that since he owed her an empire in their last life, he can pay her back with this new world. He is stunned for a moment before laughing heartily. As they move forward, the light at the end of the void passage grows deeper and more intense. We see them drawing closer to the exit, but just as they are about to step through, he suddenly senses something lurking in the depths of this new world. From a distant, shadowy corner of that realm, an obscure gaze crosses the endless void and lands directly on him. That gaze is filled with both curiosity and scrutiny, as if a being high above the clouds is watching an uninvited guest with great interest. He lets out a cold laugh. To be honest, that pressure is indeed terrifying, but it is nothing more than a greeting. He still remembers his past life, hiding away for centuries in a high-level world like a coward. The memory of living under someone else's thumb is still fresh. It was a suffocating feeling he never wants to experience again. No matter who is watching, even if it is a god, he will not bow. The light finally swallows their 2 figures. Meanwhile, deep within a formidable sect in that high-level world, an ancient being opens his eyes. A piercing golden light flashes within his cloudy pupils, as if he can see through the void to the very essence of all things. "What kind of fate is this?" he whispers, looking up at the dissipating ripples in the sky. A meaningful smile touches his weathered face. He notes that 3 stars have gathered, the 7 Killings as the blade, and the Army Breaker as the wind. With the Greedy Wolf as the soul, this is a destiny that hasn't appeared in this world for a very, very long time. The last person to possess such a fate stirred up a storm that shook the entire continent to its core. But in the end, that person disappeared into the Forbidden Lands. The old man closes his eyes once more, his withered fingers tapping rhythmically against the stone table. He finds it interesting and wonders just how far this new arrival will be able to go. As the secret chamber falls into silence, we travel thousands of miles away, where 2 figures are currently falling from the sky. They descend toward a vast and boundless land. And so, our new story has only just begun. We find ourselves deep within the Shun Mountains, where the jagged cliffs rise up, impossible to ignore. It seems the madness of the Jean family is becoming increasingly difficult to hide from the world. The girl watches silently, her eyes fixed on the horizon as the golden light fades. A sharp, stinging tension hangs in the air. It is a scene that feels almost scripted, as if they are truly hooked by the strings of fate. And yet, the path ahead remains far too long and uncertain for our travelers. Simply wonderful, isn't it? If you're enjoying our story, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe, and feel free to share this tale with others who might enjoy it. Your support and donations help keep the Mingjing and Diandian column alive and well. It truly means the world to us. This is Mingjing, working alongside the Diandian team. We hope you enjoyed this segment. Once again, this is Mingjing, representing the Diandian column. We look forward to seeing you again soon in the next installment of the Mingjing and Diandian series.